The time is summer 1988. The place is Brisbane City, Queensland. On that particular morning, the sun was reluctant to rise as the sounds of weeping were filling the house of this young Coptic family who recently moved to Brisbane looking for a better future. The mother, hugging her newborn son who the doctors just pronounced dead, is struggling to contain the sheer agony ripping through her heart. Her husband, mourning silently, is standing beside her trying to ease her pain.
The few Coptic families and friends who were living in Brisbane at the time surrounded the couple in crisis, offering their consolation and support. They were all facing a huge dilemma. They have no Coptic priest in Queensland to conduct the funeral prayers. The son is hiding in shame. After enormous efforts, the small Brisbane Coptic community managed to bring Father Mina Ibrahim, a Coptic priest who served in Melbourne, to conduct the funeral service. When he discovered the presence of a faithful Coptic community in Brisbane, he promised to help them with their plea to have a permanent Coptic priest.
The need and yearning to have regular liturgical services and Coptic church in Brisbane started at much earlier date.
In 1975, Mr. Asif Gindi, a reputable Copt, together with his wife Yvonne, were seeking to bring a priest over to baptize their newly born daughter. Their pursuit was successful, and Father Mina Mikhail flew from Melbourne to serve the baptismal rites.
On the 11th of October 1975, Susie Gendi was baptised. The sentiments of joy were filling the air in the Greek Orthodox Church in Mount Gravatt. This was the first Coptic liturgy and baptism prayed in Queensland.
Father Mina Mikhail sympathised with the few Coptic families living in Brisbane. He decided to come to Brisbane every few months to conduct the liturgical services and looking after the spiritual needs of these young families and their children.
Between 1975 and 1989, few Coptic priests travelled from interstate regularly to pray the Holy Liturgy in Brisbane. Among those priests were the Reverend Fathers Mina Kamil, Mina Ibrahim, Theodosius, Suriel Yusuf, Marcos Khalla, and Father Daniel El Antoni, currently Bishop Amber Daniel Abbot of St. Shenouda Monastery in Sydney. In these early days, liturgies were prayed in homes of the few Coptic families who settled in Brisbane. Among them were Naguib and Saada Gabriel, Magdi and Amal and Kamal and Rita Tadros. Mrs. Margot Salama established the first Sunday school service.
Mr. Kamal Tadros, who recently departed to heaven, exhausted many hours arranging the roster, flight bookings and accommodation for the visiting priests. With limited resources but a strong sense of community, the Copts in Brisbane used to hire either the Greek Orthodox Church or the chapel at the University of Queensland to pray the Holy Liturgy.
The Coptic congregation was growing slowly. More Coptic families sought to settle in Brisbane, escaping from the increasingly crowded Sydney and fleeing from the madly unpredictable weather in Melbourne. Some of these families favoured the beauty of the coastal city, the Gold Coast. The hope for a Coptic church and a permanent priest was still yearning in the hearts of the Coptic community in Queensland.
One beautiful morning in 1986, Naguib Gabriel, who was there from the beginning, was sipping his morning coffee when he jumped off his chair, shouting with joy, "I found it!" He found an ad in the newspaper of an Anglican church for sale in Coopers Plains. Naguib didn't save any effort to secure the purchase of the church. He negotiated with the Anglican church representative and succeeded to reduce the purchase price to $40,000.
Naguib, with Mr. Wagdi Abd Shahid, endorsed by the approval and blessing of His Grace Bishop Antonius Morcus, Bishop of Ministry for Africa, embarked on an impossible mission racing time. They travelled to Sydney and Melbourne trying to raise funds and donations to cover the costs of purchasing the church. Truly, what is impossible for man is possible for God.
The Almighty God blessed their efforts, and through the generous donations and support of many Copts who love their God and church, Naguib and Wagdi managed to raise $23,000.
In April 1986, the very first Coptic church in Queensland was purchased in Coopers Plains. Reverend Father Moros Khella, parish priest of St George Church in Kensington, Sydney, had a significant role in facilitating and supporting that purchase.
The church was given the name of St Mary. Later, His Holiness Pope Shenouda III approved to amend the name to St Mary and St Joseph's Coptic Orthodox Church.
History has been written. Prayers started to be conducted regularly in the newly purchased church.
In 1989, Father Min Ibrahim, who was still coming to Brisbane to conduct the liturgical services, fulfilled his promise. He raised the pleading of the Coptic community in Brisbane to His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, the 117th Coptic Pope. His Holiness Pope Shenouda attended to the needs of his children in Queensland and appointed Higoman Musa Solomon to become the first permanent Coptic priest to serve in Queensland.
And it was here that the history of the Coptic Church in Queensland had begun.